episode of Think About the Process. Today we'll be talking about policy process and how it impacts a country negatively and positively. It's said that policy making process or policy in general is effective when it actually solves societal problems and strengthens government institutions. Today we will not be discussing this alone. We have a guest with us. Her name is Agyampe Onyema. She's the Senior Programs Officer with PLAC, Policy and Legal Advocacy Center. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Alright, so first things first. Oh, we have Hilary here. We're so sorry. Hilary will be part of this discussion.
Of course.
That's how I said for many men.
We're sorry. We're really sorry. So, generally, to the first question, how do you think policy process impacts governance and politics in the country?
Okay, so ideally, policy making is supposed to shape an agenda for any administration or government. So, for instance, if a new government administration is coming into power, they have like policies they want to pursue, and there are guiding principles generally. So from formulation and implementation, if they are well done and well intended, should actually affect good governance. So generally laws. So for instance, the National Assembly would derive its legislation for that administration from the policies that have been set by the executive.
Okay.
So what guides the process, the entire process of policy making? And I would like to use the term research as one, and I want to find out, how important is that? Because to make a policy, you have to, the policy is meant to solve a problem, a certain problem or anything. But if you don't know the problem or the cause of the problem, that's going to tell on the policy you will make. So I think I want to ask, how important is research in policy making?
I think it's very important because you have to know what the existing problem is to create a solution. So and mind you, there are like so many policies in Nigeria, they exist. So if they are not working, then we need to find out why they're not working. And that's where research comes in. So if it's not working, what are we doing differently? And the thing is, when you involve more people, like if there is public participation in your policy making process, then definitely you're halfway to solving the process, because then you're hearing from the people. And so that's where the National Assembly comes in. So even if the executive sets a policy, which necessarily, I can't, it's binding of course, but it's not necessarily like legal or anything. Like you can't say I'm going to sue based on this policy. Now the National Assembly will now enact laws which now become more legal than the policies. And that's where the National Assembly comes in with public hearings, invites CSOs or NGOs who represent the voice of the people. And again, them being in the National Assembly represents a constituency. So if they are voicing the problem, it's supposed to be that they are voicing the problem of their people. And then that makes it more inclusive.
Yeah. So I think it's interesting you mentioned, because I think a lot of people confuse these two things, policy, law, and then bill.
Law, policy and laws.
And then, so at one point, of course, we know that maybe a bill is a law that hasn't been passed yet. So at what point do we move from saying policy and then calling it a law? Are they connected?
There's a connection. Policy making is the entire thing. So if you say I'm a policy maker, that means I'm involved in making laws, I'm involved in drafting policies. But in the real sense of it, the executive sets the policies, and then the lawmakers actually, do the bills and the acts and the laws. So, but they are all politicians. It's their agenda, and so everyone is inclusive.
So is it safe to say that we can characterize policy as that for the executives and law for that as that for the legislature?
In real sense, yes. But the whole time of using public policy and policy making, of course, it's all of this together.
Okay.
Right. In line with what you said about people's participation in policy making and how essential it is for their voices to be included, would you say that Nigerians are aware of the importance of their participation in policy making process, and how can we help make that more, help them to be more active in policy making? Because the truth is, whether or not they decide to participate, these policies
They
affect
go on,
them.
yes. So Nigerians, generally speaking, law, we always say there is a general rule and there are exceptions. So generally speaking, I don't think Nigerians know what is going on. There are exceptions. There are people who are keen. There are people who go out for the information. There are people who work in the space like us, so we know. Maybe our family members learn from us when we talk, all those sort of things. But there are people, a lot more people who have interest in Nigeria, who goes on the National Assembly or even the executive arm of government. So I don't know if it's a deliberate thing. I don't think this is. We need to teach more to schools. Civic education has to be much more intense. People have to understand what it is, and without being, a lot of people, even educated people, cannot tell you what exactly goes on. So I think that lack of, it's not interest, it's lack of knowledge. Is what is.
So, considering our current situation where the whole world is faced with the pandemic, is it safe to say that COVID-19 exposed a lot of fragilities that has to do with Nigerian policies? And how would we have managed this whole thing?
I think COVID-19, yes, exposed a lot. First of all, we are a very reactive country. We do not, we are not proactive. Even in our policy making or legislation, I think we are not proactive. So, and that's where your comment about research is also very important. So, for instance, when I'm taking up a position in government, I have an agenda. I should have researched properly on what I want to do. This is how we're going to achieve it, and all of these things. You don't get in there and find out that there are issues. COVID-19 took the whole world, by surprise, but a lot more people were more prepared than us. So now we have had to adjust our work schedules. We have had to rework our method of spending. So a lot more of online spending, a lot more buying things online. I think for me that retail therapy really helped. Being at home, but I can't really go to the stores, but I could shop. Do a couple of things. So again, technology needs to be improved in Nigeria. So COVID-19 exposed a lot of these things, and we are going back now, but we're not thinking that anything could happen again like this. So maybe at the end of this whole lockdown, return to work normally, everything is back at normal. But I do not think that we should see it like that. There is an opportunity for a lot more growth in technology, based on what has happened. And if any government is serious, they'll be looking at how they can harness that. Online schooling, for instance, you don't need people physically in a space to come and write exams or go to school. We need to be able to work all those things out. In some countries, people are homeschooled. There's the option of you writing an exam to move on to it. So, for instance, why I can decide that I don't want my children to go to primary school, they can go and write the first school leaving certificate when the time reaches. So we should be thinking in those lines. It happens everywhere else. And so you wouldn't have the debate of whether having children to go back. It would have just been a normal process, and you just work more on it, something like that. But I don't know, maybe I think we don't want to be too forward thinking. Maybe people are scared. I don't know. I don't know.
I want to go back. I want to go back to the point of research. I feel like I have doubts personally. I feel like when I see when I hear some policies that are aiming to solve these particular problems or to do this, I question if these policies will really solve these problems. Like, is the policy in line with the problem exactly? So that brings in the question of are policymakers, are they guarded with the adequate information concerning a problem in order to draft a policy that will solve that problem?
Some of them they have staff. who are, a lot of people nowadays recruit younger staff, research assistants and all of those things. So even if you are not fully abreast of the situation, you should be able, you can afford to have people who will give you the information. Even if you're not tech savvy, you can pay somebody who is tech savvy. You know, things like that. So that might not even be the problem. My own is the intention. If something is well intended, you will do everything possible to ensure that it achieves the aim that it was put out there for. And that's where I see that there's a lot of lack of political will. We can say a lot of things, but we're not really doing them because we're just sitting there.
Yeah.
So if you say it and you mean it, you make it work.
So in line with that, you already actually stepped answering the next question, which is how do we now make these policies actually work? How do we hold these policymakers to ensure that they actually do the research, they actually have the right intent towards the people? Because the truth is, when policies are not human-centered, then you're actually not solving anything, and then we still have the same problem rearing its ugly head again. So how do we actually get to the point where?
I guess more people just have to be interested in what affects them. So, for instance, during elections, if you have people running for office, you should be more interested in what they are going to do for you when you get there. How are they going to represent you? So if that conversation starts at that level, so what are the laws you're going to push when you get to the National Assembly? When you become governor, what are you going to do for us? All those things, as simple as that. Make them accountable. Because I think that's a very important thing, something that is lacking. If people were accountable, they would do better.
Yeah.
But, and it cuts across almost every sector in Nigeria. It's not just about policy making and all. I mean, even in offices, in the private sector, when people have companies draft policies and all that, they make sure that people are held accountable to. So you have your staff policy, your staff manual, you have your health and whatever manual. So they put other checks in place to ensure that people follow that. So that's what makes the office tick. So but in the public sector, people are not held accountable. And that's where the problem is. So Nigerians have to take the decision to say, we are going to hold you accountable for what you said in the beginning and ensure that it is being implemented. So take, for example, agriculture now is a big thing in this administration. There are a lot of policies, there are a lot of laws, things are going on, money is being funded, but do we really know what's going on?
Yeah.
So that's it, except you're interested, but I think we should make it, a point of duty to be there to say, okay, let me actually follow what is going on now.
Okay, so I think my last question would be around metrics, because we talk about metrics a lot, how to measure the success of anything. So I'd like to know, how do we measure the success? What are the metrics to measure the success of the implementation of the policies that we have in place? Is it just like, is it when the problem is solved? Do we just say that's when that's
How do you know when the problem is
solved? So yeah.
Well, I think generally good policies should actually put measurable outcomes in their policy making and all that. So you can tell when there's a change in either behavior or in whatever it seeks to achieve. So for instance, this administration had the economic recovery, which was a policy for at that time we were just coming out in a recession, and so that was a way to bounce the country back into economic recovery. So, but if you go through it, they had things. There was an overall impact and change and all of those sort of things, and then you see the measures in which you could tick off and say, okay, this achieved this and that. That's what a good policy is supposed to have. But if it doesn't have that, it actually states what it sets out to achieve. So if there is a policy on education and it says by 2025 we want to see 100 million children out of school. I don't know who's going to measure that, but people can actually have things in place to say, there are NGOs who do monitoring and all those sort of things. So it's for them to put out their findings in public and say, okay, this is what it has done, this is what it has not done. Like the food feeding program, under Empower.
Yes.
So there are CSOs who work in that line, and the government actually, put them together to be able to monitor what they are doing and to see if it has actually achieved what it's set out.
Yeah, I think I like the fact that you mentioned put the information out there, because it's for. When I asked this question, what I had in mind was for the public, for the people who are not in this policy making process, who do not see what is checked off and what is not checked off and all that. So I like that you mentioned that we put it out to the public. So that means information is also very key.
Information is key, because some people will not go out to look for that information.
Yeah.
But if I put a publication in the papers as someone who works in that space, saying that we actually went to the state to monitor if school feeding program was working, and we went to 5 schools and this is what we found. All those things help the public as well, so they'll know. So this thing is not working. All this, or being on radio and TV and all those things, or what we're doing now.
All right.
I think it was a very interesting conversation. It was great having you on our couch. Thank you so much for
red couch.
Thank you so much for your time and for sharing. So this is where we draw the conversation for today. So see you next time.